Her own kind abandoned her for being a mini alien girl until a human finally held her in his arms.
Rain fell in sheets across Ravenna district, pounding the rooftops and spilling into broken gutters that no longer carried water properly. The streets were a patchwork of cracked stone and rusting metal grates, slick under the weight of the storm. Neon signs buzzed and flickered over empty stalls, their colors bleeding through the rain, announcing businesses that no one wanted to enter after dark. This was the district where waste from the docks and upper quarters always seemed to settle, the place where people ended up when they had nowhere else to go. Neri crouched beside a stack of discarded crates near a half-collapsed wall. She pressed her arms around her knees to keep herself from shivering. Her violet-tinged skin was dulled by mud, her long black hair heavy with rain, strands sticking against her face. Her clothes clung to her small frame, an old skirt that had been cut short and frayed, a loose top with straps that never stayed on her shoulders. Each movement made her aware of how exposed she was. She had lived like this for months, scavenging whatever food others threw out. Her people, tall, imposing, proud, had long since pushed her away. They saw her as defective, too small to be part of them, too weak to carry weight, too short to command respect. At 1 meter 45, she was considered unfinished, a burden. They had called her mini alien until the word stuck like a brand. Men laughed at her attempts to stand among them. Women sneered when she reached for food. No one saw her as an adult, let alone as a woman. Her stomach cramped sharply. The smell of bread drifted out from a nearby bakery, hot and rich even through the storm. She stood and moved toward the doorway, her bare feet slapping against the wet stone. She held out a hand, her voice barely steady. "Please, just a piece." The baker didn't meet her eyes. He slapped her hand aside as though brushing away a stray insect. The loaf remained in his grip. His face showed no anger, only dismissal, as if she wasn't worth wasting words on. Behind him, two women waiting in line muttered and turned away, wrapping their cloaks tighter as though shielding themselves from disease. Neri pulled back, shame stinging worse than hunger. The skirt stuck to her thighs, her top clung to her chest. She wanted to disappear into the rain. A laugh broke out behind her. Two dockhands leaned against a wall, chewing on skewers. One nodded toward her. "Look at her, smaller than a child. What man would waste a credit on that?" The other grinned, spitting into the puddle at her feet. "Not even worth the bedroll, just dirt with legs." Neri lowered her head, retreating quickly. Each word landed heavy, not because it was new, but because it was always the same. The rain masked her tears as she hurried down the alley. Then the horn sounded. A long, low wail cut through the district. Security patrol. People scattered immediately, dragging their carts, pushing past one another to avoid being seen near the alleys. Neri's chest tightened. Earlier, she had stolen half a roll from an abandoned stall. If anyone searched her, they would find it. A beating, or worse, would follow. She bolted toward the drainage canal, her thin frame darting through crates and piles of trash. Her feet slapped hard against the wet stone before she dropped into the shallow trench where runoff water streamed past. She crouched low, pressing her back against the wall, hugging her arms around herself. Her breaths came quick and loud, and she tried to smother the sound under the noise of the storm. She imagined the boots approaching, the grip on her arm, the drag back into the open street. Footsteps approached. She closed her eyes. Not again. Please, not again. The footsteps stopped. Silence lingered longer than she expected. When she opened her eyes, a figure crouched above her at the edge of the canal. Human. His coat was plain gray, the fabric soaked through. His boots were old and scuffed. His hair, short and brown, clung wet against his forehead. His face looked tired, drawn from long hours, but his expression was steady. He was not armored, not holding a weapon. His hands were rough, but not from violence. Ink stains marked the skin near his nails, the telltale sign of someone who worked with paper, not steel. His name was Darren Core, 35 years old, a cargo scribe at the docks. His days were spent bent over manifests, recording shipments that came and went, a job most considered dull. He had no family in Orvena. He had transferred here 2 years earlier because the position was stable and came with a small room above the district's warehouses. That was his life. Routine, paperwork, and the quiet guilt of knowing he lived among poverty he never had the power to change. Now, for the first time in months, he had stopped. He could not look away from the girl in the mud. Neri's body tensed. Her thoughts raced. What does he want? Why isn't he shouting? Why isn't he dragging me out? She pressed herself harder against the wall, waiting for the inevitable demand. Instead, Darren slid the coat from his shoulders. He held it toward her, lowering himself slightly as though not to frighten her. His voice was calm, firm but not unkind. You don't have to stay here. Neri froze. She didn't trust the gesture. No man had ever offered her warmth without taking something in return. Her eyes darted across his face, searching for the cruelty she expected to find, but his gaze didn't shift. There was no smirk, no sneer, only a quiet seriousness. He leaned closer, his coat still extended, rain dripping from its edges. Come with me, just for tonight. Neri's chest tightened. Her breath shook. She didn't know if she could believe him. She thought of the bakery door slamming in her face, of the laughter from the dockhands, of every night she had curled near trash fires with nothing to eat. Her hands trembled. She could run deeper into the alleys, disappear until morning, keep surviving as she always had. Or she could reach out, take the coat, and risk whatever came with it. Her fingers twitched. She lifted her arms slowly, hesitantly. The coat fell over her shoulders, heavy, smelling of wet fabric and faint ink. Warmth spread across her back for the first time in weeks. Her thoughts scrambled. Why? Why me? What does he see? Darren stayed where he was, steady, silent, watching her without judgment. For Neri, it was the first time anyone had paused long enough to see her not as a burden, but as a person. The storm raged above, horns fading into the distance, but neither of them moved. Something had shifted, though neither knew what it would mean yet. The walk from the drainage canal to Darren's apartment was slow. Neri kept her head down, clutching his coat around her shoulders as though it might be snatched away at any moment. The streets were empty now except for the sound of the storm. Darren didn't try to touch her again, didn't push her forward, didn't speak. His silence unsettled her almost as much as the offer itself. Men usually had words, sharp and loud, but he gave her none. He only walked at a pace she could keep, glancing back to be sure she hadn't disappeared. They reached the docks, where the tall frames of cranes loomed through sheets of rain. Workers had gone for the night, leaving the place eerie and hollow. Neri had never been this far into the shipping quarter. She usually stayed closer to the alleys where the discarded food ended up, where the watch patrols rarely bothered. Her mind whispered doubts with every step. Why is he taking me here? Does he live alone? Will there be others waiting? What does he really want from me? At the far end of a narrow row of warehouses stood a stairwell leading to the second floor. Darren led her up, the wooden steps creaking under his weight, her lighter frame making barely a sound. He unlocked a plain metal door and pushed it open. The room inside was small. A single lamp burned weakly, casting light over a table crowded with stacks of paper. Shelves were lined with ledgers, each stamped with shipping codes. A cot stood against one wall, neatly made. A stove and small basin filled the opposite corner. It smelled faintly of ink and damp wood. Darren stepped aside to let her in first. She hesitated on the threshold. The last time she had been invited inside anywhere, it had ended with hands gripping her wrists and a demand she hadn't been able to meet. She lingered, dripping rainwater onto the floor. He didn't urge her. He simply said, "You're safe here." Her eyes flicked to him, searching for a lie. His face stayed unreadable, only tired, his coatless shoulders damp from the walk. Slowly, she stepped inside. Her stomach growled, loud enough to startle even her. He didn't comment. Instead, he moved to the stove, pulling out a dented tin pot. He filled it with water from a jug, then added dry grains and a handful of vegetables from a small crate by the wall. It wasn't much, but the smell rising as it warmed filled the room with something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Neri hovered near the door, arms still wrapped around herself. She couldn't shake the thought that food came with a price. He would feed her, yes, but later he would want something else. They always did. Darren set a chipped bowl on the table, ladled steaming stew into it, and placed it where she could see. He sat across the room, not watching her directly, giving her space. His own bowl remained empty. "Eat," he said. His voice was quiet, not commanding. Neri approached slowly, her eyes never leaving him. She picked up the spoon with trembling fingers, dipped it into the broth, and raised it to her lips. The warmth spread through her chest, almost painful after days of cold bread crusts and scraps from the ground. She ate faster, then faster still, until the bowl was nearly empty. She set it down, hands shaking, her body unsure if it could handle so much at once. She glanced at him again. He still hadn't moved. She frowned. "Why aren't you eating?" "I will," he said simply, as if it didn't matter. Her suspicion deepened. No one does this for nothing. She clenched her fists on her lap, whispering, "What do you want from me?" His gaze met hers for the first time since she began eating. It was steady, not hard. "Nothing." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Everyone wants something. I don't." His tone carried no edge, no frustration, only calm. She wanted to argue, to accuse, to push back against the lie she believed it had to be. But the words caught in her throat. She studied his hands, ink-stained, rough but not violent. She studied the room, plain, without signs of wealth or indulgence. No shadows of others lurking, no hidden threats. Just him, and silence, and warmth she didn't trust. Darren finally rose, walking toward the cot. She flinched, ready to run, but he only pulled a blanket free. He returned to her and set it on the table within reach. "For you. The bed's yours tonight. I'll take the floor." Her chest tightened. Why would he give me the bed? Why give me food and warmth and expect nothing? Fear and exhaustion tangled inside her until she couldn't tell them apart. He spread his coat on the floor and lay down, turning his back to her. The lamp burned softly, the rain beating against the window. Neri sat frozen for long minutes, staring at him. No one had ever turned their back on her without fear. No one had ever left themselves open in her presence. She moved to the cot slowly, clutching the blanket around herself. The mattress was thin, but softer than the ground. Her body ached. Her eyes burned, yet she couldn't close them. She watched the rise and fall of his back. Why is he doing this? When will the price come due? Hours passed. His breathing deepened, steady and unbroken. Sleep, real sleep, something she hadn't seen in others around her for so long. Neri's head sank into the pillow. For the first time in months, she didn't sleep outside, and the simple act of lying in a bed with a roof above her felt unreal. Fear still clung to her chest, but alongside it came something she had never expected: relief. Morning arrived slowly, the storm easing into a steady drizzle outside the window. The sound of water dripping from the roof filled the silence in the small apartment. Neri opened her eyes, unsure for a moment of where she was. The thin blanket was still around her shoulders, and the smell of ink and damp wood lingered. She turned her head. Darren was still on the floor, his coat bundled beneath his head. His breathing was steady, his face relaxed in sleep. She sat up carefully, scanning the room again. In the dim lamplight the night before, she hadn't noticed details. Now she did. The shelves of ledgers, the neat stack of papers on the table, the ink stains on the floor where bottles had spilled. There was no sign of anyone else. No woman's scarf, no extra boots by the door. Just him, living alone above the docks. That answered a question she hadn't dared to voice the night before. Was someone else waiting here? The answer was no. This place belonged only to him. Her stomach twisted again, not with hunger this time, but with unease. She still didn't know what he wanted. Men didn't bring her in from the street out of kindness. Men didn't give their coats, their food, their beds, and ask for nothing. She studied him closely, searching for a crack in the calm mask he wore. His face gave nothing away. Darren stirred and opened his eyes. He sat up slowly, rubbing the back of his neck, then glanced at her. "You slept." His voice was rough from sleep, but steady. Neri hesitated. A little. Her tone was cautious. She didn't want him to think she was grateful, not yet. Gratitude led to expectation. He nodded. Rising to his feet, he moved toward the stove, checking the small crate for food. The simplicity of his routine caught her off guard. He wasn't watching her, wasn't circling like a predator waiting for the right moment. He just set another pot of water to boil. She stood, still wrapped in the blanket, bare feet on the cold floor. "Why did you bring me here?" He didn't look up. "Because you were in the mud. No one should be left there." "That's not an answer," she pressed. "People walk past me every day. Why didn't you?" He paused, finally turning toward her. His expression stayed calm, but there was a heaviness in his eyes. "Because I couldn't." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. She shook her head. "You'll want something later." "They all do." Darren didn't flinch. He let the words sit in the air. "I won't ask you for anything." Silence stretched between them. Neri studied him, trying to see if there was any lie beneath his steady voice. Her thoughts churned. Maybe he's playing a longer game. Maybe he's patient where others are not. She couldn't relax. When he finally stepped closer, she stiffened. He didn't touch her. He reached past her shoulder, lifting a small towel from a hook on the wall. He offered it. "Dry off. You'll get sick if you stay wet." Her body tensed as his hand came near. She half expected him to grab her arm, to prove her suspicions right. Instead, he simply weighted the towel in his hand. After a moment, she reached out, fingers brushing his as she took it. The contact made her flinch, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. His skin was warm, rough from work, but the touch was gentle. No force, no threat. Her breath quickened. She stepped back, clutching the towel, her thoughts tangled. Why does this scare me more than cruelty? Why does softness feel dangerous? Darren didn't press. He returned to the stove, his movements steady. She dried her hair slowly, eyes never leaving him. For the first time, she wondered not what he wanted from her, but who he was when he wasn't here in this room. "Why are you in Orvina?" she asked suddenly. The question had lingered since the night before. He didn't look like the others in this district. He didn't drink, didn't laugh in the alleys, didn't sneer. He glanced at her over his shoulder. "Work. The registry needed scribes. I came here 2 years ago. You write lists all day. Cargo manifests. Shipments in and out." His tone carried no pride, only fact. "It's quiet work. Pays enough for this place." She studied him carefully. He wasn't a fighter, wasn't a guard, wasn't a trader. Just a man who spent his days recording goods that passed through hands richer than his. That realization unsettled her. If he's so ordinary, why me? Darren ladled a smaller portion of stew into a bowl and set on the table. This time, he filled one for himself as well. He sat opposite her. The act itself felt like an answer to her fears. Not a master feeding a beggar, but two people sharing a meal. Neri lifted her spoon slowly, eyes on him. She noticed the way his gaze dropped when she moved, the way he forced himself to focus on his bowl. Her chest tightened again. Does he want me but won't say it? Or does he really see nothing? The silence stretched, heavier than words. When her spoon scraped against the bottom of the bowl, she set it down with shaking hands. Her voice was quiet. "If you don't want anything, then why do I scare you?" Darren froze, his hand tightening around the spoon. He didn't deny it. He looked at her directly. "Because I don't want to hurt you, and I'm afraid I might." Her heart thudded. No one had ever admitted fear of her before. It made him human in a way she hadn't expected. For a long moment, neither moved. The rain pattered against the window. The smell of stew lingered between them. And for the first time since she had met him, Neri's guarded eyes softened. The rain had thinned to a mist by the next day. The streets of Orvina district slick but alive with movement. Merchants reopened their stalls, hawking bruised fruit and secondhand tools. Dockhands shouted across the street, their voices carrying over the grinding of carts and the creak of pulleys. For most, it was just another morning. For Neri, stepping outside with Darren was something she had never imagined doing. She walked close to him, the coat he had given her wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her legs trembled, not from hunger this time, but from the sharp sting of eyes following her. People always stared, at her height, at her clothes that clung wrong, at her presence among them. Alone, she could melt into shadows, avoid attention. But with him at her side, every glance felt louder, every whisper sharper. Many aliens got herself a keeper now, a man muttered as they passed. His companion snickered. Nary's shoulders tightened. Her instinct was to shrink, to make herself smaller still, but Darren kept walking at the same steady pace. He didn't look back, didn't respond, but he didn't change the way he walked either. His stride never hurried, never faltered. His silence was not indifference, but defiance. She glanced up at him. His face gave nothing away, but his hand shifted, brushing close enough to hers that she could have taken it if she dared. She didn't. Not yet. The thought alone made her chest tighten. At the corner near the docks, two women carrying baskets slowed their pace as Nary and Darren approached. One tilted her chin, eyes sweeping Nary from head to toe. She looks like a child wearing scraps. The woman said under her breath, though loud enough to sting. And he's walking beside her. The other shook her head, lips pressed thin. Nary froze mid-step. Heat rushed her face. She wanted to turn, to run back into the alleys where at least the insults came from a distance. But Darren paused beside her, glancing back at the women with a calm, unreadable expression. He didn't argue, didn't shout. He simply looked at them until their voices faltered, until they broke eye contact and moved on. Then he looked back to Nary, waiting. Her throat felt tight. She forced herself to keep walking. He matched her pace, saying nothing, as though the choice to move forward had always been hers. By the time they reached the warehouse rows, her chest ached with the effort of holding herself together. She stopped under the overhang of a loading dock, leaning against the wall. Darren stood nearby, giving her space. "You shouldn't bring me out here," she muttered, her voice low, raw. "They'll laugh at you too." "They already do," he said simply. Her eyes lifted, startled. He leaned back against the wall, folding his arms. "They laugh because I work with paper instead of steel. Because I don't drink with them at the end of the shift. Because I don't fight when they want me to. They'll find a reason, no matter what." Nary's breath caught. She had never thought of him as an outsider too. To her, he was solid, ordinary, untouchable by the cruelty that always clung to her. But in his words, she heard the same weight of rejection she carried. Different shape, same sting. She looked down at her hands, trembling. "At least they don't call you less than human." His gaze softened. "No, but they don't see you for what you are either." Her head jerked up. "And what am I?" For the first time, his expression shifted. He studied her, not with pity, not with dismissal, but with something sharper, heavier. "A woman. That's what I see." Her chest tightened. The word felt foreign in her ears, dangerous even. She swallowed hard, unable to hold his gaze for long. A woman. Her people had never given her that. They had given her scraps, names meant to cut, reminders of her size. Never that. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sounds of carts creaking and water dripping from the roof above. She pulled the coat tighter, not to hide, but to steady herself. When they finally returned to the apartment that night, she lingered at the door before stepping inside. Something inside her had shifted. The streets still mocked her, but she had walked them with someone who hadn't let go. And that defiance, quiet and simple, had planted a seed she didn't know what to do with. The rain returned that evening, pounding against the thin window panes and dripping steadily from the roof. The room smelled faintly of damp stone and ink. Nary sat near the table, legs pulled up to her chest, the coat still wrapped around her shoulders. She hadn't spoken much since they returned from the streets. The voices of the women still echoed in her head, sharp and mocking. Even with Darren walking beside her, the shame clung to her skin like the mud she could never quite scrub away. Darren moved quietly around the room, checking the stove, arranging papers on the shelf. His movements were unhurried, but Nary noticed the glances he gave her, brief and careful. He seemed to know she was struggling, but he didn't press her. After a long silence, he set a small basin on the floor near the stove and filled it with water from a jug. He struck a match, lighting a small heater beneath the basin. Steam began to rise as the water warmed. Nary's body tensed. Her hands gripped the blanket tightly. She knew what this could mean. Men often offered water or warmth as pretext, the first step towards stripping away what little dignity she had left. Her pulse quickened. Darren crouched beside the basin, testing the water with his hand. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "You've been out in the rain for days. You need to wash. You'll get sick if you don't." Neri's throat tightened. "I can do it myself." He nodded once, standing, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Then I'll give you space." He moved toward the table, turning his back as if to prove his words. Her mind raced. Why turn away? Why not take what's easy, what everyone else does? The offer of privacy unsettled her more than demands would have. She sat frozen, heart pounding, watching his broad back. He didn't move. He stayed where he was, as if the choice truly belonged to her. Slowly, she rose and approached the basin. The steam warmed her face, carrying away some of the chill lodged in her bones. She knelt, dipping her hands into the water. Dirt streaked away from her fingers instantly, turning the surface murky. She bit her lip hard. "He's really not watching me." After a long moment, Darren's voice broke the silence, quiet and steady. "Do you want me to help or not?" Her stomach twisted. The question wasn't a demand. It was an option. No one had ever given her one. Her voice shook. "If you try anything, I won't." The certainty in his tone left no room for doubt. It was simple, firm, not defensive. She hesitated, then whispered, "Fine." Darren turned, moving toward her with slow, deliberate steps. He crouched beside her, picking up a small cloth. His movements were careful, deliberate, like a man handling something fragile. He dipped the cloth into the water, wrung it out, then touched it gently to her shoulder. Neri flinched, every muscle in her body tightening. But the touch remained soft, only the warmth of water spreading across her skin. He moved the cloth slowly, wiping away the dirt and rain, careful not to pull at the strap of her top. Her breath trembled. No one had ever touched her this way, without urgency, without cruelty, without hunger. It confused her, frightened her. She glanced at his face. His jaw was tight, his brow furrowed in focus. He wasn't looking at her body with hunger. He was concentrating on the task itself. Still, her thoughts spiraled. Why is he doing this? What does he see when he looks at me? Does he pity me? Or she caught her own reflection in the darkened water of the basin. Her small frame, her sharp collarbones, the dirt streaking away to reveal the violet glow of her skin beneath. For the first time, she wondered if there was something worth seeing. Darren rinsed the cloth again, moving to her arm. His fingers brushed hers briefly as he steadied her hand. Her breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. He didn't linger, didn't hold, just cleaned carefully, methodically, as though the act itself mattered more than anything else. She closed her eyes for a moment. The fear didn't vanish, but beneath it, another feeling crept in, something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Safety. When he finished, he placed the cloth back in the basin and sat back on his heels. His voice was calm. "That's enough for tonight." Neri opened her eyes. She stared at him, trying to read his face. He looked tired, yes, but also steady, composed. No gloating, no expectation. He simply rose and returned to the table, giving her space again. She remained by the basin, her body still tense, her mind buzzing. But as she touched her clean skin, warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel like dirt, and that terrified her more than anything. The storm carried on for 3 more nights. Each evening, the rain drummed against the thin glass of the window, filling the room with a constant hiss. Neri lay on the cot, the blanket drawn tight around her, listening to the rhythm and to the steady sound of Darren's breathing from the floor below. Sleep refused to come. Her body was exhausted, but her mind kept circling the same thoughts. He had not touched her since the night of the basin. He had not asked for anything. He gave her food, a place to rest, and space to breathe. No demands, no hidden price. That should have calmed her, but it didn't. It unsettled her more deeply. She had learned to survive by expecting cruelty, not kindness. Cruelty she could resist, endure, even understand. But kindness with no strings left her adrift. She rolled on her side, watching him. His coat was still bundled beneath his head, his arm draped over his chest. His features were sharp in the dim lamplight, relaxed in sleep. She could see the lines near his eyes, the wear of years spent working, the quiet fatigue that clung to him. She studied him as if searching for a crack, something to confirm her fears. But he slept soundly, unguarded, as though her presence didn't threaten him at all. Why? The question repeated itself until her chest ached. Why me? Why now? What does he see when no one else does? The following day, when he returned from the docks, she noticed the way his eyes flicked toward her before settling back into routine. He set down his papers, moved to the stove, prepared their meal with the same simple efficiency. She sat at the table across from him, arms folded, studying his hands as he worked. The silence between them stretched longer each night, heavier with things unsaid. When he finally set a bowl in front of her, she broke the silence. Why don't you ever ask me what I was before this? He looked up, meeting her eyes. Because it doesn't matter. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to remind him that everyone else believed it mattered, that her people had branded her defective, that the streets called her dirt. But his steady tone disarmed her. He wasn't pretending not to know. He was saying it didn't define her. She lowered her gaze to the bowl. You don't understand. They'll never see me as a woman. I'm not them. The words were simple, but they cut straight through her defenses. Her spoon shook in her hand. She set it down, unable to eat. Later, when the lamps were dimmed, they lay again in their separate places. The room was quiet except for the storm outside. She shifted beneath the blanket, her body restless, her thoughts louder than the rain. Every time she moved, the fabric of her skirt pulled higher, the loose strap of her top slid lower. She wondered if he noticed. She wondered if he tried not to. Her breath quickened. Does he want me and hold back? Or does he truly feel nothing? Am I safe because he sees me, or because I mean nothing to him? She turned toward him in the darkness. His breathing was steady, but she could see the tension in the way his hands curled near his chest. He wasn't as calm as he pretended. He was fighting something: desire, restraint, fear. Neri's own fear deepened. Not of him, but of herself. Of what it meant if she wanted him to. Of what would happen if she reached out and found only pity waiting. Her heart thudded hard enough to hurt. She lay there for hours, staring into the dark, caught between need and terror. By the fourth night, the silence had become unbearable. She sat up suddenly, clutching the blanket around her. Darren stirred, opening his eyes. He looked at her without speaking. Her voice shook. Why do you keep holding back? He didn't answer at once. He pushed himself up slowly, leaning against the wall. His eyes were steady, shadowed in the dim light. Because I don't want to use you. I don't want kindness to become a cage. Her chest tightened. She swallowed hard, forcing words out past the lump in her throat. And what if I want more than kindness? The silence that followed was heavier than anything they had carried before. His eyes didn't leave hers, and she felt the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. For the first time, she realized the danger wasn't that he would take too much. The danger was that she might ask him to. The storm eased on the fifth night, leaving the air heavy and damp. The streets below washed clean, but still reeking of rot. In the small apartment above the docks, the silence between Neri and Darren had grown so thick that every movement felt charged. She sat on the cot, knees drawn close, the blanket sliding off her shoulders. He sat at the table, sorting through a stack of ledgers with more force than was necessary, his hands rougher, his jaw tighter. Neri's eyes lingered on him, tracing the set of his shoulders, the way his hair clung to his forehead. He looked ordinary, tired from a day of work, but beneath that ordinariness was the same steady restraint that had both infuriated and unsettled her since the night he first offered his coat. The restraint itself had become unbearable. She rose without warning. The blanket slipped to the floor. Darren's eyes lifted, surprised but unreadable. She crossed the room slowly, every step deliberate. Her bare feet whispered against the wooden boards. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the ink stains still clinging to his fingers. Her voice came low, trembling but firm. I can't keep waiting for you to prove me wrong. Either you want me or you don't. Say it. Darren's throat worked as he swallowed. His eyes locked with hers, sharp and uncertain. Neri. No. Her voice cracked, but she didn't back away. Don't give me half words. I've been thrown away too many times. If I'm just pity to you, tell me now. I'll go back to the mud. At least I'll know the truth." Her hand shook as she gripped the edge of the table, bracing herself for rejection. She had prepared herself for cruelty, for laughter, for dismissal. What she hadn't prepared for was the intensity in his gaze when he finally spoke. "You think this is pity?" His voice was low, strained. He pushed back the chair and stood, his height casting her in shadow. "I don't sleep because I want you. I hold back because I'm afraid of breaking what little trust you have left. Every time you look at me, I can see the fear in your eyes, and I can't stand the thought of being the one who puts it there." Her breath caught. Her chest ached from the weight of his words. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then her voice came out as a whisper, almost defiant. "Then stop holding back." The words hung in the air, raw and dangerous. His jaw tightened. He reached for her, slow but deliberate, giving her every chance to retreat. She didn't. Her body trembled as his hands finally rested at her waist, warm and steady. Neri's breath shuddered as she looked up at him. For years, she had been told she was not a woman, only a burden. But in his eyes, in the way he touched her now, she felt the truth burning away every echo of those words. He lowered his head, their foreheads brushing, his breath warm against her skin. When his lips finally pressed to hers, it was not gentle. It was desperate, years of silence and restraint breaking in a single moment. She clutched at his shirt, pulling him closer, needing the contact as much as she feared it. The kiss deepened, clumsy and raw, not polished or practiced. It wasn't about perfection. It was about need. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. For the first time, she wasn't shrinking, wasn't trying to make herself small. She stood in his arms, wanted chosen. When they finally broke apart, breathless, she pressed her forehead to his chest. Her voice shook. "Don't let me go back. Not ever." His arms tightened around her. "I won't." The rain outside had stopped completely. The city was quiet, the storm spent. Inside that narrow room above the docks, the storm that had been building between them had finally broken. Morning came clear and bright, the first day in weeks without rain. Sunlight streamed weakly through the narrow window of the apartment, catching on the edges of the stacked ledgers and the basin by the wall. For Neri, the light felt foreign, almost unreal, as if the world outside hadn't been the same one that had laughed at her, shoved her aside, and left her in the mud. She sat on the cot, wrapped in a simple blanket, watching Darren move about the room with quiet purpose. He set 2 bowls of porridge on the table, steam rising. His movements were steady, unhurried, the same as always. But something between them had shifted. Last night had stripped away every layer of silence and doubt. The tension that had filled the room for days was gone. In its place was something fragile but certain. Neri crossed the room, the floor cool beneath her feet. She sat opposite him. For a moment she hesitated, waiting for the familiar unease, the voice in her head whispering you don't belong here. But it didn't come. Darren slid the bowl toward her without a word, as he always had. The difference was in her chest, in the way she no longer wondered when the price would come. They ate in silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence of suspicion. It was quiet comfort, the kind that didn't need words. Every now and then, his gaze lifted to meet hers, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from the certainty that he saw her. Only her. Later, when they stepped into the street together, heads turned. Whispers followed. "There she is, the mini-alien," someone muttered. A dockhand laughed under his breath. Neri's instinct was to shrink, to hide behind him, but she stopped herself. She lifted her chin. Darren didn't falter either. He walked beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. When her hand twitched uncertainly, his found it and held firm. The murmurs faded into the background. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt like someone seen. That night, back in the apartment, she sat on the edge of the cot, watching him put his ledgers away. Her voice was quiet, steady. "When they look at me, they see nothing. But when you look at me, I feel whole." He turned, his expression serious, as if the weight of her words deserved nothing less. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently against her cheek. "You're not whole because of me. You've always been whole. I just never looked away long enough to miss it." Her throat tightened, eyes stinging. For years, she had begged for scraps, begged to be treated as more than a mistake. Tonight, she didn't have to beg. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. Later, as she lay against him, the world outside silent except for the faint creak of the docks, she whispered, "You're my home now." Darren's arms tightened around her. "And you're mine." The story didn't end with a rescue in the mud, or with a fight against the city that mocked her. It ended here, in the quiet certainty that she was wanted, not as a burden, not as pity, but as a woman. Neri had been abandoned by her own kind, but in his arms, she had found belonging. The whispers, the stares, the insults, they no longer defined her. What defined her was this: the choice to stay, the choice to be held, the choice to be loved. And for the first time, there were no doubts left. Only peace. Several weeks had passed since the night Neri had finally spoken the words that changed everything. Life in Ravenna district hadn't grown softer. The streets still whispered, the faces still stared, but inside the narrow apartment above the docks, something permanent had taken root. What had begun in fear and hesitation had become a rhythm they both shared. On this morning, sunlight filtered through the window without the weight of rain. The room was warmer, quieter. Darren was at the table, bent over a ledger, but his movements were slower than usual. Neri moved about the room with ease, her frame still slight but no longer hunched with shame. She wore the simple wrap he had given her, the fabric draping neatly over her body, fitting as if it had been made for her rather than scavenged. She placed a steaming cup of broth on the table beside him. "You'll wear yourself out with those lists," she said. Her voice held a teasing warmth that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. He set the pen down and looked at her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "And who would keep track of half this city's shipments if I stopped?" "You care too much about crates and numbers," she replied, settling into the chair across from him. Her eyes softened. "But at least you care." They ate together in quiet comfort. There was no tension in the silence now. When their hands brushed while passing the bread, Neri didn't pull away. She left her hand resting against his for a moment, letting the warmth linger. After breakfast, she leaned against the window frame, watching the docks below. "I never thought I'd be here. Not just safe, not just existing, but here." She touched the glass, eyes distant. "Sometimes I wait to wake up in the mud again." Darren moved behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders. His voice was low, steady. "You're not going back there. Not ever." She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. "Then I want more than just safety. I want you. All of you." No hesitation this time. The words hung between them, heavy with intent. He didn't answer with words. He leaned down and kissed her, not with the urgency of before, but with slow certainty. She responded without fear, her hands moving to his chest, gripping his shirt as if anchoring herself. The kiss deepened gradually, each moment deliberate, a promise made real. He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the cot. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her legs around his waist, her body trembling not with fear, but with anticipation. When he laid her down, the light from the window fell across her face, catching in her dark hair, illuminating the violet glow of her skin. She looked up at him, breathless. "I don't want pity. I don't want gentleness because you think I'll break. I want you to want me." "I do," he whispered, his voice rough with truth. What followed was not rushed. Every movement was drawn out, careful yet certain. He traced the line of her collarbone with his lips, his hands sliding over her waist, her hips, grounding her in the reality of being wanted. She responded with equal intensity, pulling him closer, guiding him with a need she no longer hid. Their bodies moved together with growing urgency. The hesitation of earlier nights burned away. Her gasps filled the small room, his breaths heavy against her skin. The cot creaked beneath them, the rhythm of their movements raw, unrestrained. Each kiss, each touch carried the weight of everything they had denied themselves. When a moment came, it was not quiet. It was fierce, consuming, a collision of years of hunger and loneliness finally answered. She cried out his name, her body arching against his, and he held her tightly, his own release following in shuddering waves. After, they lay tangled together, their skin damp, their breathing uneven but slowly steadying. Neri rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, grounding herself in the reality that it was not a dream. "I thought I'd never be seen," she whispered, her voice faint, almost breaking. "But you see me, not small, not nothing, a woman." He pressed his lips to her hair. "That's all I've ever seen." The window stood open, sunlight warming the room, the streets below busy with their endless noise. But here, in this space, they had carved out something untouchable. The world could call her whatever it wanted. In his arms, Neri was no longer abandoned, no longer mocked. She was chosen. She was loved. And for both of them, that was the true ending.